and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, I'll be discussing the classic 1985 Australian post-apocalyptic dystopian action film and third entry into the overall Mad Max franchise, Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome, as directed this time around by Georgemiller, who indeed directed the first two movies in the series, and Ogilvie. The film brings back the character of one Max Rockatansky, or Mad Max, as played for one final time by Mel Gibson, an ex-police officer now travelling across the barren wastelands of Australia, continuing his never-ending search for water and gasoline in a fight for survival following an apocalyptic war which completely devastated the world. On his relentless search and after having been robbed of all his possessions, Max happens across a settlement known as Bartertown, where their leader, Anti-Entity, as played by Tina Turner, makes a deal with Max that in return for his services in ridding them of somebody who stands in their way to obtain complete control of the town, Master Blaster, as played by Angelo, Rossitto and Paul Larsson, Max would then be reimbursed for his losses. The deal? A fight to the death in the town's arena, the Thunderdome, where the rules are simple. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. However, after regaling on the deal, Max finds himself banished and left outside in the desert to die, only to then be found by a group of children who have been living in their own isolated oasis as refugees following a plane crash many years ago. Thinking he is their saviour, that a group of children set out in order to find their promised land, only to instead find Bartertown, coming up against the formidable forces of Anti. Together with Max, the group must find a way to escape the vengeful clutches of Anti and look to find their own place in the new world order they can call their home once and for all. So, once again, Max now finds himself on the wrong side of a deal and in a number of scraps and scrapes that end up being the fight for his life. Now, the idea of the movie is pretty cool. Bartertown and the Thunderdome, absolutely full of promise, and the setup of the two at the beginning of the movie have so much investment. Then we end up in Neverland. All we really needed was Tinkerbell, and we would have been going full-on Peter Pan. Somewhere along the way, the movie kind of loses its main focus and giving us a kind of irreverent and surreal, yes, even for this franchise, side story in which Max seems kind of lost and bewildered. And if he was, we stood absolutely no chance whatsoever. With all the kind of promise of the Thunderdome, what we actually get, well, is completely different. At the start, Miller sets up an immersive and flamboyant environment. There are certainly more of the grand theatrics and then some that we have then seen in the franchise to date. Definitely building on the vision created within the last movie and kind of bringing us a wider vision of the world in which Max now finds himself. Again, a complete evolution and diversion from the last movie as a society that continues to devolve and find itself in its kind of constant fight to hold any resemblance and remnants of a society now long since past. It is a completely overindulgent movie for sure, and elements work well to serve this. The characters that Max encounters in Bartertown itself, and yes, I'll say it again, the Thunderdome, are indeed the movie's highlights. The environment which has been created certainly extends Miller's vision, but I did feel that the movie had undertones having to kind of compete with other movies released around the same time, such as Indiana Jones, Conan, Red Sonja, and whilst this kind of centred around the kind of the Mad Max universe, it felt more like a fantasy than a dystopian action movie. And I think in that, it lost its way and connection to its own USP. And while indeed what Miller had kind of got right in the last installment, the idea of the Thunderdome was gritty, succinct and certainly more fitting with this overall universe. We needed more Thunderdome. There was a certain element of grounding within the first two movies. Frantic and overplayed, yes indeed. But I think this had less to do with Max's kind of fight for survival than it did giving him a newfound saviour complex. The evolution of Max from man on a mission to warrior, acrobat and all-round superhero felt forced and too easy. There was this kind of distinct drive to make more out of the character than we had previously seen. But in this we had lost the raw kind of primal instincts which drove Max in the first place. It lost the snappy, punchy kind of flow of the second, its more focused and simplistic approach. This was far too clunky and tonally mixed, not really centering on a particular theme, almost kind of seeming like it was two films kind of just simply pasted together, the Thunderdome and Neverland, with a hastily rushed, half-bothered plot to then find a way to kind of bring them together. A very undecided movie indeed, trying to be very much something it should never have been. However, if the movie doesn't lose you somewhere along the way, after suffering one of Wendy's bedtime stories, we are in fact treated to a return to normality, with a chase sequence across the desert as the occupants of Bartertown try and chase down Max and the children as they try and escape. Now that, in itself, was worth waiting for, or at least fast-forwarding to. They were obviously going for spectacle at this point. For as weak as the plot which got us to this point completely missed the point, the spectacle works. And again, we have an element, a fraction, I suppose, of what made the second one work so well. And indeed, one of the most exhilarating elements of the movie. Once again, the direction at this point is totally on point and truly detailed. The concept vehicles used are amazing and true to the series. Some brilliantly practical stunts which are as frantic as they are captivating, bringing us, back to where Miller had excelled in the series so far, where he is obviously the most competent and comfortable, and in this, it more than shows. It's just a shame we had to work our way through all of the rest of the literal pig swill to get there, and a shame that it just wasn't coherent enough to really give us an ending with more of a substantial impact, as it surely more than deserved at least that much. One of the more surprising elements for me was actually Tina Turner. Never having seen the movie previously, having an 80s movie feature a pop star seemed very much like a gimmick. But do you know what? She actually really turned the role into her own, letting a kind of fearsome side out. I think it certainly spoke to her feistiness and status as a diva more, absolutely. Definitely bringing this kind of exotic flair and her own flamboyant bravado. It also helped that she can pretty much knock out a good tune or two, of course, offering quite a couple of different melodies and songs for the film, both at the start and at the end. The last one, We Don't Need Any More Heroes. Oh, fantastic, fantastic. It's been singing that all the way through the franchise. I didn't realise it was just in this one. But nonetheless, yes, a brilliant part. But ultimately, this seems and feels so far removed from the first and the second movies, it's difficult to kind of imagine at points that this has any kind of continuity with the franchise at all. If it wasn't for the return of Mel Gibson, who, and let's be honest, in this one, spends most of the movie wondering what on earth he's actually doing there, or trying to be at least the last true action hero on earth, Overall, the set design and the scope of the movie is amazing. Offbeat, but amazing. And we do have a strong first act expanding the Mad Max universe and Miller's distinct vision. However, it starts to lose its way somewhere far beyond the Thunderdome, and everything starts to kind of go off the reservation. It's all a bit surreal, and like I said, even for this franchise. The movie feels too disjointed, almost at times like it's another film altogether, kind of heading off on its own voyage of fantasy. There's a sense of desperation to kind of showcase the world and vision on a number of levels. Perhaps a bit too desperate. There are a number of intriguing elements that set up the film well and feed directly into its end game, where I cannot fault the movie's sense of style, action sequences and practical special effects, which when we do get them are simply superb. But then the film leaves you in that much of a disarray that it's kind of really hard to get as involved in these sequences as much as they really did deserve. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions and other movie-related content. Absolutely loved having you here at SciFirst MovieTalk, and definitely love to have you back. Most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.